One Piece has had no shortage of amazing tone-setting moments, like Soja King shooting down the government flag before Enies Lobby, Kaido one-shotting Luffy in Act 1 Wano, and then even Luffy hitting him right back with Red Rock to start off Roof Piece. All of these moments kinda set the stage and hyped up what we were about to see next. But one moment like this that often gets forgotten is all the way back in Chapter 1, where Lucky Roux set the tone for the entire story when he shot a mountain bandit in point-blank range. This moment really showed us that a pirate's life is a dangerous one. I mean, Lucky Roux caught more bodies in the first chapter of One Piece than Kaido did during our 4 years in Wano. And directly after this, we saw Shanks bet on the new era by trading his arm to save Luffy's life. Oda used these two actions to show us right away that despite all the goofiness One Piece was going to have, it was going to have its serious moments as well. And that's kind of made me a huge fan of Lucky Roux ever since, despite the fact he spent about as much time on screen as Yasopp has spent with Usopp. But on 2 different occasions, we have seen him ask Shanks if he's gonna go meet up with Luffy, both after Marineford and after Wano. So it's almost like Roux wants to see that reunion as much as we do. But one thing that I've always heard about Lucky Roux, going almost as far back as I can remember as a One Piece fan, is that he's supposed to be one of the fastest people in all of One Piece. Now, I do think there's a little bit of a Mandela effect here, because I could not find any legitimate SBSs or interviews or anything where Oda said that outright, but regardless, I do think there's a lot of merit to that idea. The first reason is that Lucky Roux is likely named after someone named Lucky Luke, who is a fictional cowboy that could shoot faster than his own shadow. And that kind of makes sense since Lucky Roux shot a bandit point blank in Chapter 1 of the story. You could say he's almost based on a Shadow legend, but that's not to be confused with the sponsor for today's video, Raid Shadow Legends. It's time to join up with millions of other players to take down awesome bosses, unlock new champions every month, and experience some of the best graphics that mobile has to offer. There's 3 strong reasons why I'd recommend playing Raid, and the first is that there's over 650 unique champions to match your preference in playstyle. 2 is that there are billions of ways to customize and build these champions, and 3 is that they bring new champions and updates every single month to the game, so it's always changing and keeping you engaged. And love is in the air even in the world of Raid. New players can enjoy a special Valentine's Day themed adventure with the Raid Love Quest. All you need to do to get involved is download Raid Shadow Legends with the links below, copy your in-game player ID, and then head to raidlovequest.plarium.com. There, enter your player ID and set out on a heartfelt quest running from February 14th to March 14th. Play one of the Valentine's themed minigames for a chance to win some fantastic in-game and real-life prizes, including Valentine's Day themed Raid champions and even Amazon gift cards worth up to $1,000. If you're an old Raid player, you can still share the love too by using special promo code STValentine23 that everyone can use to get a small Valentine's gift from us to you. And if you haven't started playing Raid yet, click my link in the description or scan my QR code here on the screen. You'll get unique bonuses worth $35, including free epic champion Jotun and other useful stuff. And once you're in game, you can find me under the name Daxsake, and if you're fast enough, you can even join my clan. So make sure to check out Raid, and thank you Raid for sponsoring this video. So let's get back to Lucky Roux, because another interesting thing about him is that he has a lot of parallels to Sanji. First off, according to Volume 4 Billion from Film Red, he's the cook of the red-haired pirates, which isn't much of a surprise since he might be the only guy who ate more meat than Luffy throughout the series, and apparently Roux has strong and flexible legs, which is an oddly specific thing to say, I think. On top of that, it seems like Roux is one of the wings of Shanks, yet isn't the number 2 or right hand or whatever you want to call it, which fits Sanji perfectly. And on top of that, Volume 4 Billion also told us that Roux isn't very good with women. So maybe all of these ties to Sanji give even more credence to the idea that Roux is actually going to be among the fastest in the verse, since Sanji is now so fast that he appears invisible. And look, I know it's shonen and everything, but I have to wonder what Oda's cooking up that makes a man of Roux's stature be one of the fastest in the story. But this would be far from the only time we've seen people's bodies outperform what they should really be physically capable of doing. And yes, I mean without a devil fruit involved. And the best example is definitely Saimei Kikon, otherwise known as Life Return or maybe even Biofeedback. And then there's even Qigong, which was used by Lao Ji. These are all times when people's bodies far outperform what they should really have been capable of doing. So maybe this is a good place to start theorizing what could make Lucky Roux so fast, and I think it's best to start with Life Return. The best example of this is from Kumadori from Enies Lobby, who said he was able to spread his consciousness even to the tips of his hair so that he could control them at will. And Chopper said that he he remembered reading about something like that before called biofeedback. And Lucci was able to tap into the same thing to alter his hybrid form, and yes, he does have a devil fruit, so maybe there's a caveat here, but it still shows us that Life Return has the potential to both give you a greater degree of control over your body and alter it more than is typically possible. And going into this video, I kind of assumed that Lao Ji did the same thing as Lucci, but it was a totally different ability called Qigong. This turned him into a much bigger and stronger form of himself because he built up young muscle and stored it away to counteract injury, illness, or even just plain old age. And when I heard that line, one of the first things I thought of was Kureha, who still hasn't shared what the secret to her youth is. So that's some nice foreshadowing for a video that I'm working on about Chopper's awakening that you can expect to see in about a month or so. But we don't have a whole lot more information on this Qigong ability just yet as far as canon material goes. But there was a filler episode with a Marine from the Long Arm tribe of all things named Aunt Day Bonham who used another version of Qigong, except it wasn't in an age-related way. And yes, I know it's not canon technically, but the Qigong ability is canon, and the Marine was also in Stampede as well, so let's just roll with it. Aunt Day Bonham used Breath Qigong, which let him use techniques called Adios and Gracias that made him bulkier so that he had more power, or leaner so that he had more speed. So this shows that Qigong can be used for more than what we saw with Lao Ji. It also kind of reminds me of how King turned his flame on and off to be either faster or more durable while fighting Zoro. Or maybe even how Chopper accesses all sorts of different points with his Devil Fruit, and can even mess with those thanks to his Rumble Balls, which were said to distort the wavelength of the fruit's biochemistry. It almost seems like Qigong or Life Return let you do that manually, like without a Devil Fruit, as if you can align your mind and body well enough to achieve whatever form you want, which is eerily similar to what Kaido said about Devil Fruit awakenings, and maybe even some of what Vegapunk said about how Devil Fruit powers are born from dreams, and how they represent the furthest branches of evolution, as if only doing X or Y became possible. Maybe your own desire can mimic what Devil Fruits are capable of, and that would be perfect for someone like Lucky Roux, since Volume 4 Billion confirmed that nobody on Shanks' crew has a Devil Fruit. And we also know that Shanks' sword Griffin is a flaming sword, so it's almost like they can recreate Devil Fruit powers through will alone. And I want to give a quick shout out to Parvision because some of his first videos I ever watched on his channel discuss this very subject more in depth, so I'll include those links down below. But what does this all mean for Lucky Roux? Well, if you haven't noticed, many of the members of Shanks' crew have names that are tied to liquids and usually a beverage, such as Lime Juice, Bonk Punch, Yasopp is also known as Chaser, and a roux is a mixture of fat and flour to thicken soups and sauces. And Shanks did say that the best sake he ever had was from his hometown, so that at least ties his origins to a drink as well. And oddly enough, he and Binks both have names that end in the same kanji, being Kusu, so maybe there's an interesting tie between these two. Like, does Shanks carry the will of Binks, perhaps? But that's definitely for another time in another video, because as I said, roux is used to change the consistency of soups and sauces. So quite literally, it can make things thicker or thinner depending on what you're looking for. And I just gave several examples of people changing themselves from small to big and vice versa through Life Return and Qigong. And not to mention, roux literally means redhead in French, and he's obviously on the red-haired pirates, so maybe everything was right under our nose the entire time. I bet Lucky Roux's secret sauce is that he has mastered Qigong, or maybe Life Return, or whatever this biofeedback stuff is, so that he can just be way faster than he should be. And maybe this is the reason he's always eating, so that he can replenish those calories to use in one big burst of speed or power. So that would mean that at some point, we will get to see a thinner Lucky Roux, I think. Or maybe even a much bigger one that kind of looks like Lao Ji. And remember everything I mentioned earlier about how closely Roux parallels Sanji? Well, maybe their connection goes even deeper than everything I've already said. We know that one of Sanji's core philosophies is to never waste any food, and that's because he knows what it's like to be starving out at sea. And all we ever see Lucky Roux doing is eating food. Maybe that tells us that Roux comes from somewhere where food was scarce, so now he eats as much as he can. So maybe he knows what it's like to go hungry like Sanji does. I mean, food insecurity is a very real issue in our world, and Oda hits on big issues like this all the time. So I could see Roux being from some type of impoverished country, maybe facing war or drought or something, and that's what ultimately led to Roux learning Life Return and Qigong in the first place. Maybe he was almost forced to use up his body's energy efficiently in order to survive, and that's what ironically leads to him being such a powerhouse today, and maybe why he's constantly eating. I mean, while it seems like a gag, maybe it's a subtle reminder of his dark upbringing. This could also tell us that all the red-haired pirates might be deeper reflections of the Straw Hats as well. I mean, Luffy and Shanks is obvious, and even Yasopp and Usopp, as well as the fact that both of the crew's musicians died, but it seems like only one of them's coming back. But maybe Zoro and Beckman will have a surprisingly similar story as well, or some of these other random guys that we haven't really met yet. And we all know that at some point, these two crews are gonna meet up, and many have theorized that they could have a Davy back fight, or maybe just an all-out brawl like Roger and Whitebeard's crews had. But whatever it is, I think it can provide a perfect chance to show how the Straw Hats stack up, as well as an opportunity for the Straw Hats to add one final power-up to their arsenal before the final war. For instance, maybe Roux and Sanji simply want to have a race versus each other, and at first, Roux just absolutely smokes him. Sanji would likely be flabbergasted at how that could be possible, and thus could start almost a small training arc where Sanji learns to use Qigong and Life Return to increase his speed and power. And I think that makes a lot of sense because remember, Sanji is a modified human at this point, and he already has increased toughness and durability. Imagine if he was able to control his own body to a greater degree and unlock some insane new abilities, since he's using Qigong or whatever on a scientifically enhanced body instead of a normal body. And maybe some version of this is what allowed Sanji's burning passion to manifest as fire all along in Diable Jambe. So mastering it can lead to whatever Oda wants to at this point, I think. And on top of that, Sanji learned the 99 recipes in Kamabaka Kingdom, and it almost feels like Oda forgot that ever happened. But maybe controlling his body's processes to a greater degree would allow him to take better advantage of those, since they are what gave members of Kamabaka Kingdom their muscular physiques and all, supposedly. But one last element to Roux that I'd like to discuss is his family name, which is Lucky. As I mentioned before, Lucky Roux is based off of Lucky Luke, a cowboy from a Western-style cartoon by a Belgian artist named Morris, and Luke is most well known for shooting faster than his own shadow. Now, this made me think of two things right away, and the first is that technically speaking, everyone moves faster than their own shadow because of the very brief moment that it takes for light to go past you and create the shadow in the first place, but more importantly, it made me think of Moria. We saw Moria use his shadow powers to essentially make the shadow the lead and forced Or's body to follow it. And while Lucky Roux obviously doesn't have that devil fruit, we did spend a good chunk of this video discussing how Haki or Will might be able to mimic devil fruit powers. So what if the reason Roux is so fast is because he can force his shadow to move and his body follows it? So that way, no matter what his size is, he's able to move as fast as he wants. While this is probably less likely than the Life Return or Qigong ideas, I wanted to at least bring it up because it illustrates just how many options there are for Lucky Roux, and to a greater extent, Shanks' entire crew, who we've been waiting to see in action since chapter 1. If you guys enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a like and subscribe because it really does help the channel, and maybe even check out one of these two videos that you should probably already see on the screen. Later.